Botanical Ally Building. Botanical Ally Building project by Kaula Azam. For my project, I decided to use white sage. I used to buy sage plants from farmers markets, and that is where I decided to get my new sage plant for this project. The stem was already pretty weak when I bought him, so I had some bay leaves that I had. I took that thick stem and I tied it around the stem of my plant, but over the course of the project, my plant kind of suffered. I didn't have enough sunlight. I accidentally overwatered it. I didn't have enough drainage because the soil is supposed to be nice and dry. Nonetheless, I did choose sage, and it shouldn't be too hard to take care of, even though it was for me. But the other images we have are the dried up white sage. This looks like it was from an older plant. It's lighter, it's softer. The dried up sage is a little bit cottony. Underneath it we have the blooming of sage plants. I didn't know that they bloomed until this project. So they bloom little white flowers that bees really love to come and hang out with. And then we have some more sage bushes and a nice little drawing, and this one is also going to start blooming pretty soon. So to continue, harvesting conditions and how to harvest white sage. Harvesting sage should be done lightly the first year to allow the plant to get firmly established in its roots. You don't want to start harvesting a plant that isn't sedentary yet. Pruning after it flowers, and then don't harvest it anymore until the spring, so that the plant has about a month or two to recover from and survive from the frost of the winter. I like to harvest younger, non-flowering, seeding fronds in the late spring when the leafy sprays are large, juicy, and vital. Mature plants tend to be wider and are safer to harvest since it's a larger plant and they're stronger and they have enough power to recover from the removed leaves that you're going to be pruning at the top. And as soon as any seeds are visible, you're going to want to grab those as soon as you can, because birds really love to eat those seeds, maybe squirrels too, or anything like that. And then to harvest your plants for medicinal purposes, for drinking teas. Sage tea has antiseptic qualities and makes a good gargle for sore throat. Sage may boost insulin action, and therefore a daily cup can help anybody with diabetes, depending on what type of diabetes you have and the effect that sage has on the insulin and sugar levels. You'll need about 1 or 2 teaspoons of dried sage leaves. So I'd probably say like 3 large leaves would be good for a cup of tea. And don't add it to some boiling water, just hot water. I found these 2 posts on Instagram and Facebook. You can find more posts by Mestil Projects. They provide important sage protection information and harvesting information. The fall season is the growing season for sage, so harvesting sage during this season or during this time is not going to be benefiting the plant at all, and it'll actually harm it. Some California natives have asked people to stop harvesting sage altogether, and we should definitely be respecting this request. Although sage is not yet on the endangered list, it's being extremely impacted by excessive and inappropriate harvesting. It's basically a genocide against a plant, or I think it's herbicide. We discussed it in one of the articles we read recently, but it's basically being stolen from public land. So you might be breaking the law collecting plants on public lands. It's prohibited. So please do not buy or steal any sage, especially don't buy it from online retailers that you can't actually disclose their sources. Please respect the wishes of California natives, and before purchasing any sage, ask where they harvest their sage from. Is it local, and do they hand bind it, and things like that. Should you be harvesting sage at this time? Sage for smudging is best harvested after periods of high heat, which is going to be in the late August or in the cold January through February. What are you prepared to offer in exchange for the plant? It's customary to bring an offering in exchange for what you're about to harvest and take with you, which is a huge part of the one of the guest lectures speakers that we listen to. It's all about reciprocity, giving and taking. Don't take too much. How much should you harvest from this plant? Take only about 5%, as you might not be the sole person to harvest from the sacred plant. Do you know where on the plant to cut it? So when you are harvesting, you're going to want to avoid the drier, woodier part. You're going to want to cut it on the lighter, fleshier part, so that new leaves and new growth, and it'll promote growth rather than destroying the plant. So please return and care for the plants. Clean up any plastic trash. Don't leave anything around. And don't break off the branches. Step on the plants or water them. Do not water them either. For the white sage habitat, where is the white sage native to? White sage, also known as Salvia apiana, is a shrub that's endemic to low elevations of the coast hills and valleys of Southern California and Baja, Mexico. So we have it on the west coast of California, going all the way down to parts of Baja, Mexico. There is more growth on the southern part of California in the desert. There is sage. What type of environment does it thrive in? So these areas have Mediterranean style climates where the winters are wet. We do get rain. Summers are dry. It is pretty hot, but overall temperatures are moderate year round. Where has it naturalized? The plant communities where Salvia apiana naturally occurs include coastal sage scrub and chaparral areas. The coastal sage scrub area is dry but foggy and has shorter areas. The coastal sage scrub is dry but foggy and has shorter plants than those in drier inland chaparral. Plants in coastal scrub areas are drought deciduous types. This means that instead of remaining full and green during the summer, they generally lose their leaves at this time. In contrast, the chaparral plants are evergreen and generally have tough leaves that aid moisture retention, so white sage might act deciduous in one location and it might not in another, evergreen in another. Does it grow locally? It does. In its plant profile of Salvia apiana, the Natural Resources Conservation Service notes that the plant also is found in Southern California's yellow pine forests and desert scrublands, which was on the southern east side of California. Here's a map of only California. The desert mountains in the Mojave Desert do have sage, which is different, a little bit different in character and in shape and in texture and in height even compared to the coastal white sage shrubs. As for the scent of white sage, it smells a little bit sweet, but also a little bit bitter. It's slightly astringent. Has an earthy taste to it, smell. It's piney, a little bit earthy. But overall, it is a part of the mint family, so that has a cooling sensation of the nostrils and head. Taste-wise, it's slightly peppery and savory. It's a family of mint, so there is a hinted cooling sensation. Since it's bitter and astringent, It would be a part of the air element when looking at the 5 elements associated with plants. Texture-wise, when it's dried, it can be crispy. It cracks when you touch it. It can be cottony and thin. But when it's still attached to the plant, when it's still moist, it's velvety, it's nice and soft. It's a little bit thicker and plumper than dried sage. And it's a sort of lumpy texture to it, which you can see in the image above. When you're drinking it as in a decoction, a tea infusion, it dries the mouth a little bit, maybe because it's bitter, but it is astringent also, and it'll slowly decrease the secretion of fluids. This is actually a possible reason why it helps women's menopausal symptoms. And above it, I put an image with the brain attached to our 5 senses, because the tea infusion experience allows us to address each sensation and have like an overall experience and like absorb various forms of information from your plant. So there's 4 different names for the Salvia apiana white sage. Salvia apiana is derived from the word salvia, salvia derives from the Latin word salvio, known as to heal or to save. Also, it can be referred to as like a salve, something you put on your body, a solution or ointment. Its other name is white sage, most commonly known as, and it refers to its physical attributes. Older bushes tend to be wider, dustier, and a little bit more fuzzy looking. It's also known as sacred sage, which refers to the religious, ancestral, and spiritual qualities of the plant and why it's used in religious sacred ceremonies and traditions. Also known as bee sage. During late April, early June, the sage will bloom tiny little white flowers that we saw in my intro picture that are dotted with lavender that bees flock to. And over here is my drawing of the white sage. I tried to draw a little the top where it prunes, where you should trim it if you do decide to harvest your plant, and I drew a little white bee next to it. Medicinal preparation. White sage tea decoction is prepared by steeping sage leaves in hot water, not boiling water. Care is taken not to add white sage leaves to boiling water, as boiling water will destroy some of its medicinal value. Steep it with a cover over the mug to preserve the volatile oils in the liquid. Drink and breathe in those essential oils to deeply loosen up any lung tightness or ease a sore throat and promote any sweating you want. American Indians used white sage tea as a soapless shampoo. It's good for cleansing the scalp and to dry it out a little bit. This tea can also be added directly to your bathtub for a nice relaxing bath. Sage is also used as an antipyretic, used as a sweat bath to reduce fever. White sage has a calming effect on the body and the soul. It's likely due to its mellotron content, a compound which performs similar to Valium to reduce anxiety. White sage can be used internally in small amounts in the form of a tea for an array of medicinal treatments. Never ever should sage essential oil be ingested or high volumes or concentrated forms of white sage because it can be toxic. Magical qualities and uses. Magical uses for white sage. Sage is a highly magical plant that works in many different realms. It's believed to heal, protect, and cleanse the spirit, soul, emotional body, and mind through its sacred smoke. The spirit of sage is said to be a very wise entity. Getting to know sage over time on deeper levels may unlock its higher teachings and wisdom. Ethnic and cultural info for the plant. The white sage is a very important ceremonial plant that was used as far back as the ancient civilizations of the Babylonians and Egyptians. The burning of white sage was common practice, which was thought to provide healing, purification, and cleansing properties. The smoke of the white sage plant is also believed by many cultures to ward off evil spirits. Due to modernization and globalization, the idea of white sage has shifted. A modern commoditized version of spirituality has taken the forms of products promising salvation from the psychological ravages of high-tech society and magical reconnection to the balance of the natural world. Today's beauty and wellness regimens include crystals and white sage wands to banish negative thoughts, interfering with achieving one's most optimal self. And I am also guilty of this. I do buy crystals, and I used to buy smudge sticks, but after this course and having information be objectively provided, it really was an eye-opener. So now either I'll find a way to plant my own white sage and enjoy it, or I'll make sure to check where it's sourced before purchasing it. Here are two images. Are images that kind of resonate and resemble the qualities of white sage. We have on the left, these are two tarot cards. On the left we have the star. And we have the white sage, or I think it's white sage, but it's a bush, burning smoke. I felt like that image was the epitome of white sage. And then on the right, since sage needs direct sunlight, it needs to have drier soil. I felt like that resonated somehow with the hay and the dirt of horses. Nonetheless, the white horse seems calmer, a little bit more feminine, and that resonated, whereas the black horse is probably the negativity that sage is capable of calming. Sage is also known as more of a masculine plant, so the other horse kind of resonates too. And then in the middle we have the two sage names that I decided to come up with. I put Sage of the Survivors and Salvia Salvage. So in a video called Circle of Stories, we heard the creation story of the plant white sage, and the overall theme was that it was capable of perseverance and withstanding various environmental destructions. So surviving and salvaging were two qualities that I really wanted to stick with the sage. So Sage of the Survivors and Salvia Salvage. And then I found a poem online by Rachel Estart. Her poem goes as follows: Maybe I am not ready for sage. There's a power that offers that others have earned somehow or ignored. The ones who slice and bind and sell relief in $5 bundles. Maybe they have the magic understanding. Maybe they don't care what happens to them. For me, sage is still power in its desert home. Whole, honorable, endlessly alive along the roads I keep passing, giving thanks. So Rachel is capable of addressing the urbanization or the globalization and the neglect of such a sacred plant, while basically arguing that having the sage in its desert home is more powerful than having a $5 bundle. So I really liked that poem. And then my poem is on the right. It goes, wisdom comes with age, just like the graying of sacred sage. Although sometimes you'll feel only rage, do not worry about your past or future days. Hide your worries away and remember to live for today. For the astrological correspondences of white sage, I found that it is ruled by Jupiter. Other plants ruled by Jupiter are white cedar, the white sage, and dandelion. The energetics of Jupiter tend to resemble the white sage plant. So the ring of unity that surrounds Jupiter is a symbol of protection and connection to the spiritual world, much like the qualities of holistic sage. So I picked the top image mostly because it kind of looked how it kind of looks like the abalone shells that that Native Americans use for burning sage, but it also resembles the smoke that sage gives off when it's burned. Jupiter is also known as the big good luck planet, whereas Saturn is the little good luck planet. And I think the strength and the largeness and the vastness of Jupiter also resembles the importance and weight and sacredness of such a big plant like the white sage. It has such a profound importance in Native American culture and culture in general. So the reason why we should look at what plants are ruled by certain planets is because being ruled by a planet indicates that the plant has similar properties, qualities, and energetic patterns, and or that it thrives in similar environmental conditions as those that are conveyed by the planet. Emotional qualities of white sage. It has a strong calming effect of fury emotions, any arguments or confrontations. The smoke of sage is believed to carry the powers of the worshipper up to the creator, while cleansing one of the negative energies, forces, influences, spirits, emotions, and even thoughts. So there's usually when you use sage, if it's not in a real ceremony or in a religious setting and you're using it in your daily home, there is incentive to using it. There's sometimes children are afraid of monsters in their room, or you're grieving an emotional loss from someone leaving, or there's negative people who have been in your home, or something overall has not happened negatively and you want to just ward off that negative energy. You want a renewal, you want some cleansing. Sage would be a great option for that. Dried sage burning, smudging. So overall, I hope you learned a lot from my presentation, but maybe these two questions will relate to the philosophy of sustainability, and I hope you take something away from these questions. Where should you cut a sage plant when you're harvesting it, and what part of the plants are used? You should cut it not on the woodsy part. You should cut it where it's fleshier. You should cut the top where it's pruning, so that you can promote growth. And you're going to mostly use leaves, the leaves of the plant. You can use the stem for maybe something else if you would like, but mostly the leaves are burned or consumed or drink as a tea. And why should you always offer something in exchange for harvesting the plant? Discussing a lot about reciprocity and giving and taking is really important. So you should definitely, if you're going to harvest, you should give back to your plant. And I think cutting the correct part of it to promote growth could be something that you're giving. But overall, thank you. And